So I definitely think that it's very intentional that, you know, back then in the 1960s, when we had all of these wonderful civil rights leaders, MLK, Malcolm X, there were tons. I'm gonna like try to put a list here, but sorry, I don't know these names off the top of my head. I'm not perfect, but you know, I think the government realized then how strong the power of organization was and how strong our voice was. And I think it's important to realize that, you know, back in the day when only white men had the power to vote, when only white men like were allowed to have a say in everything, you know, back then was governed by like how much land you had, and it was all about, you know, the white man. You know, they used to have like bourgeois parties where like they only discussed politics. Like that was their thing. It was like their kick. It was like their high. And it only became taboo once other people, other men that weren't white and women were given the right to vote. So it's like as soon as white men realized, oh, like they were losing their power, or they felt like they were losing their power. They really weren't, right? We're just giving power to people who should have had it all along. But once they felt like they were losing power, they had to figure out how to covertly suppress the power so that they maintained their own power. So that the world that they were living in was governed by them, right? So that it's all about them and it's not about anybody else. It's very strongly about entitlement and a power struggle. So it, you know, talking about politics only became taboo when people of color and women started gaining the right to vote. It was never taboo before that. And so it became a power play to covertly figure out how to suppress the vote. And we see that with how segregation kind of led into the new Jim Crow. Like there was the Jim Crow era, and then there was the neo-Jim Crow era, which was right after the end of the Civil War. I really strongly encourage you to read about this, because it was just so covertly designed to keep black people down, to keep black people from voting, and to keep black people in their place. And you can watch like shows that kind of pay tribute to this. I know I was watching the Queen's Gambit, and in there it's like the woman, they're in the 50s, the white woman is like, oh, no, you can't get a job, only people of color have jobs. And then she was talking about women. So it's like a class system to keep them down. And like, you know, even then they did have jobs, but they were paid like crap, and still are. You know, things haven't changed. It just kind of got all redesigned. It got like a new layer of paint, but it's still the same. Things have changed, but really not much, you know. So I think it's all intentional that decade after decade, the school system has made it so that we're all boxed in. So you have to pick a binary option. So you can't do math creatively, like liberal arts has been taken out. Like you're not allowed to think creatively or abstractly. And it's all kind of designed propaganda. So at the very beginning in elementary school, you think that America is the greatest nation in the world. And it's just propaganda, because if you're lucky enough to get out and like actually travel, you see that we're really, really not the greatest country in the world. We have a lot of potential, but we have so far to go. And that propaganda is designed really well, because if you never have any desire to leave your bubble, if you have no desire to leave your town, then you're never going to know that, and you're going to be the fool thinking, oh, it's so great. It's going to be, you're literally living in the allegory of the cave. And it's just so excellently designed to keep people pinned up against each other in that way with the propaganda. But I think it's really evident that people are conditioned to think that, you know, in any way getting uncomfortable is bad. And it's like, to get uncomfortable is to grow. You can't go through growth without being uncomfortable. So if you're too afraid to get uncomfortable, if you're too uncomfortable by getting uncomfortable, then you're actually going to stay exactly where you are your entire life, and that's not good. You should be open to being uncomfortable. You should be open to being exposed to things you don't know. You should be open to learning and to perceiving things in others' eyes, and not just your own. That being uncomfortable should not be something that you shy away from. And I think the system has really conditioned a lot of people to be uncomfortable by that. And I think we need to kind of ask ourselves and be aware of these things and try to push ourselves into getting uncomfortable. But I think it's really telling that, you know, back in the 60s was the pinnacle of science and technology. We were like literally sending people to the moon. Like people were loving and getting to know computers. People were designing computers. And now today we use cameras every single day of our lives. We use circuit boards every single day of our lives. We use Wi-Fi every single day. And it's like we have all of this technology, but very few people know how to use it. So, you know, very few people actually know the intricacies of how these things work. And I think that's intentional, because if you have an elite group of people in the world who only know how this works and everybody else is clueless, that elite group has the power over everyone else. And that's exactly what we see with data control. Data is the #1 profiting resource in the world. It's like oil comes after data now, because data can be used to manipulate our psychology and actually affect our behaviors and our lifestyles. How we interact with everyone is affected by data, and only a very few elite group of people actually know how to use these algorithms and design these algorithms, and it's being designed against us as a profit point and as a marketing point for politicians. And I think that's very intentional that not many of us understand how this works or are even aware of how this works. And I think it's each and every individual's job to like wake up and take control of that and take control of your life. I think it's intentional that everything is governed by capitalism and industrialism, and that it's taboo to talk about non-Western medicine. It's taboo to talk about natural medicine, and it's taboo to talk about energy or how the government has lied to us, because if it's taboo to talk about these things, then people will be shunned away from talking about these things, and they'll be shunned away from truths. And that's what the government wants, is for us to not have our mind open to the truths, because if we are open-minded, we can organize together. And that's the #1 thing that they don't want, is for us to organize against what they have built so intricately to keep us boxed in. I think, you know, being taught in the schools decade after decade, it's like we got dumber and dumber, because back then in the 60s was the pinnacle of science and technology. And now they've taken arts out of school, they've taken free thinking out of school, everything is standardized, you have to choose A, B, C, or D. You know, there aren't really open-ended questions. People don't know how to critically think, people don't know how to dissect scenarios, people don't know how to create or invent or innovate or use the resources. It's just like, how can we strategically answer these questions A, B, C, D and get a passing score above 80%. It's about passing, it's about reaching the bare minimum as opposed to reaching your personal optimal potential. And I think that's by design. And I think it's by design that we're forced to choose binary options, and we only have these yes or no, red or blue, black or white. It can only be this or that. I think that's very intentional because that keeps us boxed in. That keeps us from realizing and breaking through the barriers to see there are so many more options out there available. There's a whole spectrum of options. But if the government tricks us into believing that there's only this or that, then we're always going to be posed up against each other, fighting over that, as opposed to coming to resolutions. And as long as we're posed against each other, we're not going to be looking at the actual antagonist, which is the government, which is capitalism. And I think that's very intentional. And I think we have to take it upon ourselves to ask these questions and to spread love and to spread knowledge, but to be able to differentiate between credible sources as well. I think it's intentional that we're overwhelmed by misinformation. I think it's important that we organize and revolutionize, and even if we have to, revolt, but I think we have to do that without social media, because social media is by design a tool to tear us apart and to take us to a lower vibration. So I just hope that maybe this gives you something to think about. I hope you learned about COINTELPRO. For me, that's like a huge eye-opener, but all of this is intentional, and we have to fight against it. We owe our ancestors at least that, but like we owe our future generation that. You know, we can't succumb. You know, like, I'm a fighter, not a lover, but I fight for what I love. So I hope you do too. I also just want to speak on the fact that when Trump was so insistent on putting Kavanaugh in office, that was very distressing for me, because of the accusations, anyone being accused, you know, of something like that, there's something fishy about it, right? Those accusations just don't come out of nowhere. But I knew that there was a reason, a bigger picture reason behind why Trump wanted Kavanaugh so badly to be there on the Supreme Court, because there's only 9 Supreme Court justices, they're lifetime positions. Like, it's so important because they change things, like they make amendments to the Constitution. So, and the bigger picture turns out to be that, and Al Gore versus Bush, when the votes had to be decided by the Supreme Court, there were 3 judges who were responsible for that decision, and one of them was Kavanaugh, and one of them was Amy Coney Bennett, or whatever the fuck her name is. So it's all very intentional. It was very intentional that these two Supreme Court justices, it's not about healthcare, it's not about Roe versus Wade, it's about intentionally changing the election and controlling the election. So it's all very intentional, and there's a bigger picture, and so just question that. ironically, today is the day of the election, and honestly, I wanted to like make this video a lot sooner, but it is what it is. You know, everybody has been really busy and been overwhelmed, and everybody's dealing with life still. I think I just wanted to, you know, I think I'm gonna move this camera. I feel like this lighting is a lot better because I can actually see. So I wanted to talk about how everything around us is pretty intentional. You know, nothing is an accident. You've probably seen, like, it's no accident that such and such people aren't discussed in history in schools. It's no accident that there aren't more black historical figures discussed in school. It's no accident that you didn't really learn the truth about the founding of America. It's no accident the way it's all designed. You know, this is really, it's like a game that we're all in. We're all part of this game, and the people who designed the game, the politicians, and now like the capitalistic heads of the nation, like the billionaires that are like leading and putting money, funneling money into policies being made into law. None of that is by accident. It's all designed to make the billionaires more profitable, to allow them escape holes so that they can you know, get away with things, and so that laws can be in their favor. And we have to pay attention to that, because basically the game that we're playing was designed by people who know the rules. And I think it's 100% intentional that Americans have been dumbed down to the point where the normal American doesn't really know the rules, doesn't know basic history. I think it all goes back to the 1960s when we organized. You know, we had the Black Panthers, and we had MLK, and we had gay rights leaders who were leading us, and the government realized
of the term revolutionary.
Well, there's no single simple meaning of the term revolutionary. A revolutionary is a man or a woman who is a lot of things, but basically the revolutionary wants to change the nature of society in a way to promote a world where the needs and interests of the people are responded to. A revolutionary realizes, however, that in order to create a world where human beings can live and love and be healthy and create, you have to completely revolutionize the entire fabric of society. You have to overturn the economic structure where you have a few individuals who are in possession of the vast majority of the wealth in this country that's been produced by the majority of the people, and you have to destroy this political apparatus which, under the guise of revolutionary government, perpetrates the most incredible misery on the masses of people.
One of the interesting things about the term revolutionary is the fact that people, so many people, see it in the context of violence, that revolutionary means violence. Violence every day, every minute, at any given time, no matter what the circumstances. How do you view this in the context of violence?
Well, of course, that's part and parcel of the same attempt to separate and isolate revolutionaries from the people. Of course, revolution does not mean violence in the sense that that's its defining characteristic.
Yet there are those who see it that way.
Well, That's done in a very conscious manner to mislead people and to lead people to, for instance, equate a progressive socialist revolution with fascism. During the time that I was out in the streets and speaking throughout California, I found it incredible how many people define socialism or communism as if it were the Third Reich.
Yeah.
Certainly, of course, though, in the history of revolutions, and not only socialist revolutions, but bourgeois democratic revolutions also, the American Revolution, for instance, you have had the occurrence of violence as a means of seizing power from the oppressor. But why?
Yeah.
This is because the oppressors have failed to acknowledge the fact that the people were right and that the people had the right to control their lives and to control their destinies. And they are the ones who always initiate the violence. If people are serious about moving ahead to create a better society, then of course they should not allow themselves to be deterred simply because a few people at the top, who are in possession usually of monopoly on violence, decide that they're going to unleash all of their forces of repression to stop them.
Angela.